They all stood in the cold morning air, staring at the broken wagon at the bottom of the hill. The wooden wheel was snapped clean in two. The horse lay still, its harness twisted, and beside it, covered with a thin white sheet, was the body of Samuel Whitaker. Everyone said the same thing. It was an accident. Samuel was a careful man, a quiet man, a man who never drank too much and never drove too fast. The road was steep, yes, but wagons had gone down it for years. The town doctor bent down, looked once, and nodded. A broken neck, quick, painless. The sheriff wrote it down as an accident. The preacher said a prayer. The town began to move on. But one thing did not make sense. Samuel's hands were burned. Not scraped, not bruised, burned. And when the sheriff finally looked closer, days later, he would learn something that made his stomach turn, something no one wanted to believe. Because what truly happened that night in 1841 was not an accident at all, and the truth was far worse. The truth was still waiting to be uncovered. Just 3 weeks earlier, Samuel Whitaker had been alive, walking the dirt roads of Hawthorne Ridge, a small town in upstate New York. The town was quiet and proud. People worked hard. They knew each other's names. Doors were often left unlocked. Samuel lived in a small wooden house near the edge of town with his wife, Margaret Whitaker. They had been married for 12 years, no children. Some said that made Margaret sad. Others said she did not mind at all. Samuel worked as a cooper, making barrels for farms and traders. His hands were strong, his back bent from years of labor. He was known as kind but distant. He spoke softly and kept his thoughts to himself. Margaret was different. She was sharp, watchful, always listening. She remembered things people said and never forgot them. When she smiled, it did not always reach her eyes. Most evenings, Samuel came home before sunset. He washed his hands, ate supper, and sat by the fire. Margaret would sew or read. They spoke little, but that was not strange in Hawthorne Ridge. Silence was common in many homes. But in the spring of 1841, something began to change. Samuel started coming home late. At first, he said work was slow. Then he said a farmer needed extra barrels. Margaret did not argue, but she watched him closely. She noticed the way he avoided her eyes, the way his hands shook when he poured water. One night, as Samuel slept, Margaret stood by the bed and listened to his breathing, slow, deep. She looked at his hands, resting on the blanket. Strong hands, hands that could build things, hands that could also destroy. The next morning, Margaret visited her sister, Elizabeth Moore, who lived 2 miles away. "You look tired," Elizabeth said as she poured tea. "I don't sleep well anymore," Margaret replied. "Is Samuel ill?" "No," Margaret said quickly, too quickly. "He's just distracted." Elizabeth leaned closer. "Men don't grow distracted for no reason." Margaret stared into a cup. "Sometimes," she said softly, "you think you know someone, and then you realize you never did." Elizabeth laughed softly. "You're thinking too much. That's always been your problem." Margaret smiled, but said nothing more. That same week, Samuel began taking the wagon out at night. He told Margaret he was delivering barrels to a farm past the ridge. She had never heard of deliveries being made after dark, but again she said nothing. Instead, she waited. On a Thursday evening, rain fell hard against the roof. Samuel pulled on his coat and reached for his hat. "I won't be long," he said. Margaret watched him closely. "The roads are dangerous in the rain. I've driven 'em 100 times. She stepped closer. "Be careful." Samuel nodded, but his face was pale. When the door closed behind him, Margaret did not return to a chair. She waited. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, just before midnight, She heard shouting in the distance. A bell rang from the town square. Margaret grabbed her shawl and ran outside, her heart pounding. By morning, the news had spread. Samuel Whitaker was dead. The wagon had gone off the ridge road. The horse had panicked. The wheel had broken. The fall had killed him instantly. An accident. That was the word everyone used. At the funeral, Margaret stood still as stone. She did not cry. Some thought her strong. Others thought her cold. The sheriff, Thomas Hale, stood nearby, watching her face. He had known Samuel since they were boys. Something about the whole thing felt wrong, but he could not say why. After the burial, Margaret returned home alone. That night, she lit every candle in the house. She opened drawers. She searched shelves. She went through Samuel's coats, his boots, his work bag. In the bottom of a wooden chest, she found something that made her sit down hard on the floor. A small leather pouch. Inside were coins, gold coins, more money than Samuel could have earned in years. Margaret's hands began to shake. The next day, Sheriff Hale received a visit from the town doctor, Dr. Jonathan Pierce. "There's something I should have told you," the doctor said quietly. Hale raised an eyebrow. "About Samuel?" "Yes." The doctor lowered his voice. "His hands, they weren't just burned by friction. The marks were strange." "What do you mean?" "It looked like chemical burns, as if he handled something hot, but not fire." Hale felt a chill. "You're saying he was injured before the fall?" "I believe so." Hale stood up. "Why didn't you say this earlier?" "I didn't want to stir trouble. The town needs peace." Hale grabbed his coat. "The truth matters more than peace." That afternoon, Hale went to the site of the accident. He walked the road slowly. The ground was soft from rain, but he could still see the marks. Something stood out. The wagon hadn't swerved. It had gone straight towards the edge. That night, Hale visited Margaret. She opened the door calmly. "Sheriff, I need to ask you a few questions." "Of course." They sat at the table. A single candle burned between them. "Did Samuel have enemies?" "No." "Was he worried about anything?" Margaret paused. "He was worried about money." Hale leaned forward. "That's interesting, because I found out he had quite a lot of it." Margaret met his eyes. "Did you?" For the first time, Hale felt uneasy. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. "Margaret," Hale said slowly, "do you know something about your husband's death that you haven't told me?" Margaret stood up. She walked to the fireplace and placed another log on the fire. The flames flared bright and sudden. "I know," she said softly, "that not all accidents are accidents." Hale opened his mouth to speak when a loud knock slammed against the door. 3 sharp knocks, urgent. Hale reached for his gun as Margaret turned pale. A voice shouted from outside, "Sheriff, you need to come now. We found something near the ridge." Hale rushed to the door, his heart racing. Whatever they had found was going to change everything. And in that moment, standing in the flickering firelight, Margaret Whitaker smiled for the first time since Samuel's death. The night air was sharp and wet as Sheriff Thomas Hale followed the young farmhand down the ridge road. Lanterns bobbed ahead of him, throwing long shadows over the trees. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still soft, and every step made a dull sound. "What did you find?" Hale asked. The farmhand swallowed. "I don't rightly know how to say it, sir." That was never a good sign. They reached a bend in the road, just past where Samuel's wagon had fallen days before. 2 men stood near a tree, their lanterns held low. On the ground between them was a dark patch of earth that did not belong there. Hale knelt. The soil was black and sticky, like something had been poured there. He touched it with a stick. The smell hit him at once. Sharp, bitter, wrong. Lie, he muttered. One of the men nodded. That's what my pa uses to make soap. Burns like the devil. Hale's chest tightened. You found this tonight? Yes, sir. Rain washed the leaves away. It was hidden before. Hale stood and looked toward the edge of the ridge. His mind raced. Burned hands, straight wagon tracks, lie on the ground. This was no accident. Cover it, he said. No one touches this. As they turned back, Hale felt eyes on him from the dark trees. He spun, lantern raised, but saw nothing. Still, the feeling stayed with him all the way back to town. By the time he returned home, dawn was creeping into the sky. Hale did not sleep. He sat at his desk and wrote notes, his pen scratching fast. Samuel Whitaker had money he could not explain. He had been working late. He had burned hands, and now there was lie near the place he died. Someone had wanted him dead. The next morning, Hale paid a visit to Dr. Jonathan Pierce. I need you to look again, Hale said, carefully. The doctor frowned. We already buried him. I know, but I need your best memory. Those burns, could they have been caused by lie? The doctor's eyes widened. Yes, very much so. Hale exhaled slowly. Then we have a murder. Word spread quickly in Hawthorne Ridge. People whispered in doorways. Women pulled their children close. Men spoke in low voices at the general store. Margaret Whitaker stayed inside. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded, listening to the sounds of the town changing. She knew this moment would come. She had planned for it. A knock came at her door. She did not jump. She had been expecting it. "Sheriff," she said when she opened it. "I need to ask you more questions," he replied. She nodded and stepped aside. They sat again at the same table. The candle was gone. Morning light filled the room. "Margaret," Hale said gently, "did Samuel ever use lie at home?" "No," she said. "I did." Hale looked up. "For what?" "Soap," she answered calmly, "and cleaning." "Did Samuel handle it?" "Sometimes." Hale studied her face. "Did he burn his hands recently?" She hesitated, just a moment too long. "Yes." "When?" "A few days before he died." "How?" "He said it was an accident." Hale leaned back. "Did he tell you anything else about the money?" Margaret stood and walked to the window. "He said he was saving for something, a fresh start." "With you?" She turned. "No." The word hung heavy between them. Hale stood. "Margaret, I'm reopening the case. Until I know more, you are not to leave town." Her eyes hardened. "Am I a suspect?" Hale said. "You are his wife. That makes you important." After he left, Margaret closed the door slowly. Her calm mask slipped for just a second. Then she straightened her shoulders and went to the back room. She knelt and pulled up a loose floorboard. The leather pouch was still there. So was something else. A folded paper, stained and old. She opened it and read the words she already knew by heart. "Meet me at the Ridge Road after sunset. Come alone." It was signed with a simple mark, not a name. Margaret folded the paper and put it back. She knew the sheriff would find it soon enough, but not yet. Not before she made sure of something else. That afternoon, Hale visited the general store. The owner, Caleb Turner, leaned across the counter. "I heard Samuel was selling barrels cheap, real cheap." "When?" "Last month. Said he needed quick money." "Did he say why?" Caleb shook his head, but he wasn't alone when he came in. Hale's heart jumped. "Who was with him?" "A man from out of town. Tall, wore a dark coat, didn't talk much." Hale nodded slowly. "Did you recognize him?" "No, sir." That evening, Hale walked the ridge road alone. He followed the path Samuel's wagon had taken, step by step. Near the edge, he stopped. There, half hidden under leaves, was a metal hook, a wagon brake hook, broken. Hale's blood ran cold. Without the hook, the wagon could not slow on a hill. Someone had removed it, on purpose. Hale picked it up carefully and wrapped it in cloth. As he did, he heard a sound behind him. Footsteps. He turned fast, gun raised. A man stood a few feet away, hands up, tall, dark coat. "Easy," he said. "I don't want trouble." "Who are you?" Hale demanded. The man smiled thinly. "Just a traveler." "You knew Samuel Whitaker." The man's smile faded. "We did business." "What kind of business?" The man's eyes flicked toward the trees. "Dangerous business." Before Hale could speak again, the man threw a handful of dirt into his face and ran. Hale fired, but the man vanished into the woods. Breathing hard, Hale knew one thing for sure now. Samuel had been killed because of something he was involved in, something illegal, something deadly. That night, Hale went to Margaret's house again. He searched carefully this time. He found the loose floorboard. He found the pouch of gold. And he found the letter. When Margaret returned home, Hale was waiting. She stopped cold. "Where did Samuel get this gold?" Hale asked. Margaret said nothing. "And this letter, who sent it?" She lifted her chin. "If I tell you, you won't believe me. Try me." She took a deep breath. Samuel was helping smuggle chemicals, lie, strong lie, sold to men who used it to hide crimes. Hale felt sick. "How?" "By destroying bodies," Margaret said. Silence filled the room. "He wanted out," she went on. "He told him he was done." "And they killed him," Hale said. Margaret nodded. "They made it look like an accident." Hale stepped back, his mind spinning. Just then, a scream cut through the night. A scream so loud and sudden it froze them both. It came from outside, from the direction of the jail. Hale ran. When he reached the jail door, it was open. Inside, one of the men arrested earlier for questioning lay on the floor, dead. His skin burned black, and carved into the wall above him were 3 words, written deep and rough: "Stay silent or else." Sheriff Thomas Hale's arm burned as he held on to Margaret's hand. His boots dug into the dirt at the edge of the ridge. Below them, the killer's body smashed into the rocks with a sound that echoed through the trees. Then there was only Margaret, dangling, slipping, her fingers pale and shaking. "Hold on," Hale shouted. "I can't," Margaret cried. Tears ran down her face. "I'm slipping." Hale leaned back with all his strength. The dirt gave way under his heels. He felt himself slide closer to the edge. Then a second pair of hands grabbed his coat. "Sheriff!" Aaron Miles yelled. "I've got you." More hands joined. They pulled together, slow and steady. Hale felt Margaret's fingers slide, then stop. With one last pull, they hauled her up onto solid ground. Margaret collapsed, coughing and sobbing. Hale fell beside her, gasping for breath. It was over, or so it seemed. The deputies moved fast. 2 of the smugglers were dead. 1 lay wounded and groaning on the ground. The 4th had run, but not far. They found him hiding near the trees, his hands burned and shaking, the smell of lye clinging to his coat. At dawn, the town gathered again, just as they had the morning they thought Samuel Whitaker's death was an accident. But this time, no one said that word. Hale stood on the courthouse steps. Margaret stood a few feet behind him, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale but calm. "We know what happened. Samuel Whitaker was forced into helping criminals move dangerous chemicals. When he tried to stop, they killed him. They broke his wagon. They burned his hands. They made it look like an accident." A murmur passed through the crowd.
The man killed in the jail was murdered to keep him quiet, and last night they tried to silence us all. People shook their heads. Some cried. Others stared at the ground. Hale looked at Margaret. She tried to warn us. Fear kept her quiet. That fear ends today. The wounded smuggler was brought forward, bound and pale. He looked at Margaret with hate in his eyes. "You think this is finished," he hissed. "There are others." Hale met his gaze. "Then we'll find them." The trials came quickly. Word of the crime spread to nearby towns. Officials arrived. Records were searched. Barrels were opened. The river near the old mill was drained and cleaned. What they found there made strong men turn away. Samuel Whitaker's seal was removed from every barrel. His name was cleared. Margaret testified. Her voice was steady as she told the court how the men had threatened her husband, how they promised to let him go if he kept working, how they burned his hands when he refused, how they broke the wagon brake and sent him down the ridge to die. When the judge spoke the final words, the room was silent. Guilty. Justice at last. Weeks passed. Hawthorne Ridge slowly returned to life. Doors opened again. Children played outside. The fear lifted, little by little. One evening, Hale walked the ridge road alone. The place where Samuel had died was quiet now. The broken wheel was gone. The earth had settled. Margaret joined him, her steps slow but sure. "I'm leaving town," she said softly. Hale nodded. "That might be wise. I wanted to thank you. You believed me when it mattered." Hale looked out over the trees. "I should have seen the truth sooner." Margaret shook her head. "Evil hides best when people want simple answers." They stood in silence for a moment. "They thought it was an accident," Margaret said. Hale turned to her, but the truth was worse. She gave a small, sad smile. Much worse. The sun dipped below the hills. The road lay empty and still. And for the first time since 1841, Hawthorne Ridge slept without lies hanging in the dark.